Hey, Church, how you doing? Good. Oh, you're just in time.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Baxter.
Here.
Himchak. Johnson.
Here.
Nuki.
Here.
Cameron.
Here.
Four present.
Thank you. I received a message from Commissioner Demachek. I would entertain a motion to excuse me. I would like to make a motion to excuse Commissioner Demachek. Second. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? Moving on, we have citizens' comments. So this would be citizens' comments on non-agenda items that are the purpose of being united and talk about short-term rental. But if there's any other items, any member of the audience would like to address the commission on, now we need the time to do that. Please go to the podium, state your name and address. And we'll limit it to 5 minutes. Anyone interested? It's okay.
Hello, Doug Mack, 1110 Charlotte Street. And I'm not sure if this is the right venue or not, but I'm really concerned with the speed and traffic and all that on Charlotte Street, as well as Pleasant Valley. And both of those come up on social media really, really regularly. And I noticed, I don't know the name of the street, but on the way toward Glenwood Beach, whatever that road is there, that they got a little speed limiter sign in there that says how fast people are going. And I wonder what it would take to have something like that near Pleasant Valley as well as Charlotte Street. So that's really the extent. I don't know what the process looks like for that. And
We'll have city staff look into it. I believe, is that in the township where they have? The
Yes.
Yes. The township requested that. So is that may be something within the realm of a possibility? I'm sure Michael consultant. State of Police Chief.
Okay.
See what the best route is there.
yeah, they did some sitting out there, and they also put one of their black boxes out there to, track how fast people are going and all that stuff. And I didn't never obtain the results of that. I think they were having problems with it, but it's really, really excessive. I can only speak for Charlotte Street, but I've heard the same thing for Pleasant Valley as well. So I would love for the city to look into that and maybe take some action on it, because there's kids, dogs, families, or, you know, all that stuff. So it's a complete, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Lisa Teal, 306 State Street. I just kind of piggyback on that. I live at State and East. That corner is really, really bad. There was an accident there the other day. Somebody was turning left, the other person went straight and T-boned them. The traffic is just so loud there. I don't know if there's a city ordinance for loud vehicles or people going too fast and you know, causing a really loud noise, but it's really, really bad. And then just walking over, I was on the next block, which is State and Park, and somebody else was turning left and another guy came straight. They almost hit. So I don't know if we could have a police officer over there or, you know, again, look into the traffic and the speed.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did you get that?
Yes.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Moving on, we'll move to our short-term rental work session. And, Scott, are we going to lead through that? Yes, thank you, Mayor. First, we'll give a little update on the latest data that we had in your packet. I provide the snapshots from the last 3 meetings. And as you may recall, back in December, there were about 141 short-term rentals in the city. That number went up to 153 in March. Went up to 165 in June. And over August of the day, there were 175 short-term rentals in the city. The growth of those was primarily in the traditional residential district. And in that area, that's really in that district, is primarily the area south. So currently there's approximately 7.2% of all the units in the city are short-term rentals. 89 in the traditional residential district, that's 20%. 49 in the family multi-family district, that's about 8.6%. 19 in the central business district, that's about 15% of the units in that district. 14 in the waterfront residential district, and 3 in the real estate district, and 1 in the professional office. That's kind of where we're at today. As you may recall, from our meeting in June, a draft ordinance was presented to the commission, which is discussed. I tried to assimilate a lot of the comments from the commission into it. Not all issues were agreed on unanimously by the commission, so I just tried to work with ordinance that would use the majority of the commission on multiple points. But obviously, there's probably additional discussion in the meeting. So this ordinance presents my best attempt to find a workable ordinance that meets the stated objectives to address the public safety, uses, and housing issues that are stated. From the previous ordinance, some of the changes that were made, registration would be required for all short-term rentals. That would exclude the personal units though. Eliminated the business unit definition and changed the definition of short-term rental and short-term rental personal units. Changed the cap definition to include only the TRG units, and the personal units would be excluded from that cap. Elimination of the lactating requirement, changed the definition of an occupant from 24 to 36 months old. Changed the local agent response time from 60 to 45 minutes. And changed the definition of a single family district to include only the TRG district. Some of the issues I didn't have complete clarity on were the grandfathering. It seems like the consensus of the condition was
not to have that, but I just want to make sure that I'm understanding that completely. The regulation by district. This ordinance, what we does the TRD district, I mean, there's some discussion in that regard. Inspections, I believe the majority of the commission was in favor of using an affidavit form as opposed to personal physical inspections. And then a cap number, where we have to determine, it doesn't have to, but if the commission does want to have a cap number, it's that number. So to go through some of the changes of the ordinance, some of the definitions were changed, a couple were added. First one was added in the basement, that wasn't in the original ordinance, and if we're going to determine occupancy rate floors, see before they have the definition of a basement, because the zoning ordinance defines it, and it doesn't count as a floor, it's more than half cover, so it's exposed basement with exit that could be counted as a floor. Cap here was just further refined to identify the short-term rental units in the single-family district, with exclusion of the personal units. The definition of license was added just to put that in there because it is a term that's used throughout the ordinance and want to make sure there's a clear understanding of that. The local agent was changed to reduce that response time to 45 minutes. The occupancy occupant was changed to an individual 36 months age of older. The single family district was identified as solely the traditional residential district. A short-term rental property, short-term rental definition was changed to say property that offers a rental of a dwelling unit for compensation for more than 28 days total per calendar year for terms no longer than 30 consecutive nights. That was increased from 14 to 28 days. The thought process there was eliminating that whole business unit, personal unit delineation, but also allowing the flexibility for some people that just want to do short-term rental out of their homes for a limited period of time, and kind of give them that ability without having to go through the licensing process. Then a short-term rental personal unit, that would be an owner-occupied property which has an accessory dwelling unit that's used as a short-term rental. So it's basically your accessory dwelling unit would be the owner could stay in one or the other, but it still have to be a license, but it just doesn't count towards the carry. The terminology for the application form was just kind of clarified, no real big changes there. I'm just trying to make it readable. And then the cap, total number of short-term rental licenses issued per year in the single family district, set by resolution by the city commission. And then this would be excluding short-term rentals personal use that would not calculate. And just so you know, in the TRD district, there's 89 units today, but not all of those would be counted towards that cap. This is the type of way you want to go, as there's probably a handful of the succession one. So the TRD district that are currently used short. The license and are not transferable, and that was kind of refined to use the definition of property transfer from Michigan laws as their definition, because without its clarity, if someone was like moving their property into a trust, we could look at it as a transfer and the license would have been involved. So we just want to kind of clear that out and make that able to have people able to do that. Then under the regulations, the local agents, Those were kind of clarified a little bit and added to, basically, to make sure that all our codes, short-term rentals are subject to all our codes and kind of clarify with the health department needs to say the codes necessary. Well, the occupancy wasn't changed, so that's still the 2 per bedroom plus 2 per floor. Is seeing the consensus of the board was the best way to calculate. So with that, that's the major changes. So I would be happy to answer any questions that you had regarding that. Or any other items you may wish to.
Just one quick thing was, so, in number 7, so how many, do you know, you said a handful, you don't really know how many of the personal units there are?
I could find out, but it's probably 6%.
Okay, but we don't have the exact number.
I would have to go back to the map and find it.
Yeah, no worries.
Anyone else? Good. Okay, so we're moving public comment now. So please go to the podium if you have a question, state your name, address, maybe 5 minutes. If you have a question, we'll try to answer it just after the comment period. You're interested?
Hello, my name is Jane Bauman, and I live at 1119 West Street, backed up to Avalanche. This summer we have 4 neighbors, and this summer we went from having 2 neighbors, from having all 4 people living in the houses to 2 short-term rentals and 2 regular neighbors. And so this issue has come up a bit where we live. I have a couple of questions. One is, I noticed that in the parking, they turn in a map to the parking, but about the parking, but then does the license say how many spaces, who determines how many spaces the rental can have? And is that the city department when they turn it in, or how does the whole parking thing work? Because we've had issues both up back to Avalanche with them parking in fields, and we've had them down in the street on Ann Street where they're, overrunning. We've also had noise issues. And I've noticed we read a bunch of other, other rules. And I noticed that some of those actually stated their noise, the city noise ordinance right in the short-term rental. And I was as quiet, I was from 10 in the evening till 7 in the morning. So I thought that was good. Right now, we know who the owner is and who the manager is of one of the short-term rentals. We have no idea of the other one. And the only reason we know of the first one is because we had such a big issue that we went through lots of gymnastics to figure that out. And I noticed that while they have to have an agent, I didn't see in here, maybe I missed it, but I didn't see any way that they were, like, would my neighbors have to tell me who the local agent is and who the owner is, or, we didn't know who to contact. And we still don't for one of them. And once we did have that, I have to say that things calmed right down because we had communication. So I think some kind of notice within, and we're pretty rural, so it'd have to be like 300 feet to even get to our neighbors. So those were my 3 kind of question areas. I had to say something, and I just want to thank you because I know this is a tough problem and we want to, keep everybody's interests in mind. So, I know you're wrestling with a tough thing, and I thank you guys for the work you're doing.
Thank you. Scott, could you address the questions raised? One about the parking. How will the map that will show?
Well, the application form, the concept of it. It was the concept to have an application form with a map of the parking, identify how many spaces they had, how many guess they could accommodate, and then identify that, okay, you're gonna be able to park on this, site. But, you know, there are parking regulations in the city that are enforced by the city police department. And, you know, I don't know how we can tell one property owner they can park in a certain way when other property owners don't have that same ability. So, if public parking is available on the street, those people would have to be able to park legally there. So, but if people are parking illegally, you know, in spaces they're not supposed to be, on other people's property, that's something.
Parking cars allowed park on city lots, like in a neighborhood for.
No.
So even for 12 cars.
You have the ability to park cars, yes, you can park on the property. Noise issues, this puts by reference our ordinances, so the noise ordinance would be applicable here. Some ordinances do put that ordinance right in this ordinance. I'm not a fan of that. I think by reference it's just as well, because I don't think the people that are going to be violating the ordinance are the people that are going to be getting licensed. I think it's more important to put that information in the visitor's guide. It puts that in the hands of those residents so they know what the standards are. So that's the way I look at it. And then how to contact, you know, with the registration process, there would be a list. You know, they can, you know, the potential to put notices out surrounding, you put that in your ordinance. It is a pretty labor intensive activity, especially in the fleet and the city. I was just doing some, you know, random spots around the city today, and I was coming up with anywhere from 30 to 60 notices that would have to be sent out. We have 180 licenses. You're looking at 5,000 notices that are going to have to go out. So that's something that would have to be accounted for in the time and effort.
Did you have a problem?
Yeah, about the notices, I wasn't thinking that would have to be a city responsibility. Couldn't that be the local agent or the responsibility? To just let the neighbors know who to contact, because otherwise we're just going to have to contact the police. If we don't know.
Right. I've never been a fan of putting responsibilities of administering your ordinance onto the public. If it's in your ordinance, it should be administered by the city. By telling them they have to do certain aspects of your ordinance, how do you verify that was done? How do you verify someone's not telling the truth when they did it or saying that they didn't? So it's tough to verify. So I would prefer, if it's going to be done, it'll be done by the city.
One more follow-up. Could it be on the website?
Yeah. We'll look for solutions. Anyone else? If anyone is interested in plans and streets, you can look at the city. So.
I'm Monica Ross, I'm from 109 East Michigan Avenue in Boyne City. I am asking the commission to ask themselves with each of these points that are in your plan at this point, what is the rationale for having it included? And is it really necessary? It's interesting that as we pledge to the flag, we say liberty and justice for all. And it seems like some of these things are taking away people's liberties and infringing upon justice. For instance, why does the city need to decide what occupancy should be? I would think the homeowner would be fully able to decide that based on their unit, as long as their tenants are not interfering with the, with the neighbors. You defined a basement. Based on your definition of a basement, I have a house with a walkout basement, but it's more than 50% underground. I wouldn't be able to sleep anybody down there with these. Yet my basement has a slider. It has a door to a utility room with a window. It has a egress window, and it has a staircase. It has 4 major areas that you could leave that basement in that room, in my family room, and yet it can't be used for sleeping based on your definition. I think that maybe the city doesn't need to include that. And then another thing that you were suggesting is that they have to submit a floor plan. What purpose or what need does the city have to know what the floor plan is? Doesn't seem like it would affect the neighbors or their ability to enjoy a nice quiet neighborhood. And defining what's a person, if they're 36 months old or not. Why does the city need to interfere? Why does the city need to be involved in that? Maybe we shouldn't have that in our ordinance, unless you are saying that you have rationale for that. If there's no rationale, just because other cities have it in theirs, doesn't mean we have to. If it doesn't, when we started this process, I believe the rationale for having an ordinance was to limit the number of units and to be concerned with health and safety. If a sleeping area has a carbon monoxide detector, a smoke detector, and 2 methods of entry and exit, is there a problem why the city should think that it's not adequate? Why should the city interfere? And another thing, as far as your guidebooks, when people are on vacation, they don't look at books. I recommend, and I did send this to you commissioners earlier this week, we have quite a few really appropriate articles already in our ordinances regarding noise, regarding parking in streets, regarding fireworks, regarding dogs at city events, and things like that. Wouldn't it be better to do a 1-page laminated sheet identifying these ordinances that are commonly a problem without out-of-towners who don't know our ordinances? And when I go on vacation, I don't know anybody's ordinances. Wouldn't it be nice to have those ordinances on a nice sheet, laminated, and ask for that to be posted near the main entry door or in another prominent space? You're more likely to reach those tenants with something like that than you are with a guidebook. I do think it's a good idea to put short-term rentals on the city website, any that are licensed, and to have it identified who the contact person is, just with a link. We don't need to send a letter to all the neighbors. Just put it there. If somebody has a problem and they need it, it's on the city website. Oh, they are? Okay. Well, I do appreciate it. I have more things to say, but in all fairness, I got 5 minutes. Thank you.
Well, it seems important to identify. And I use the definition from the zoning. The commission wants a different definition of that. You can change, but I'm not quite sure exactly how we should do it, but I mean, it could be. So then it's not saying no one can sleep in your basement. It's just that number is not used as an occupancy. So you don't put 2 people count for your max occupancy. So it's not meets the definition.
It does say that family rooms and things like that cannot be used as sleeping.
So that's how the occupancy is.
Nate Hardy, 437 North Street. I'm really glad you're working on this, and I think you've got some good points in there. I think a laminated form probably would reach more of the temporary tenants than a booklet. And not that somebody couldn't create a booklet showing what's available and how to get in touch with renters. But actually for the people currently there, it would clarify the rules they need to abide by to not cause a nuisance. And I would think anybody that's operating a nice rental area would be very happy to know that their people are not going crazy in the house they fixed up to be a rental and to make them some income. I still feel rental houses are businesses. I feel they should be taxed like a business because they have an unfair advantage over hotels and motels. Hotels and motels could handle a lot more visitors than rentals individually. But nobody's going to build them in a town where there's so many personal rentals available. So I think we have to look at traditional rental districts being able to have a higher percentage of rentals. But I think in traditional rental units, you should never go over 10%. And I think, in all fairness to the people who live there year round, is it really right to let them have 1 or 2 parking spaces and rent the home to 16 people because they've got enough bedrooms in the +2 to do that? And take up all the parking in the street for people that are going to work every morning? I don't think that's fair. I think it's ridiculous. If you have to write a new parking rule, maybe you need to do it. Because I don't think anybody, anywhere, permanent or temporary, should take up all the parking on a street. It's rude, it's inconsiderate, and it really doesn't do anything for the neighborhood. So, you know, it'd be different if it was once every month or something. They have a birthday party and they have some relatives over for 2 hours. It's another thing when they're there for a week or 2. It's a big difference. And I do think it's really hard for people not to know who their neighbors are, not to know who to contact. And most of us, I'll tell you myself, I try to handle problems in the neighborhood personally. I do not like having to call the police. So I'm really glad you're going to set up a site where the rentals are listed, the contact person and their number is listed, and the people can use that contact first. And then if they don't get response, then you go to your police department. It saves your police department unnecessary calls. And it makes people in the neighborhood feel like they're not being credited. So, and then the other thing, I think they really need to be licensed. They need to have an annual licensing fee. And I think you can cap them at less than you already have, because we already have more than double the city of Charlevoix. And I think that's a pretty high number for the size of our town. You could set it and by attrition, as the people who have bought them as retirement homes actually retire up here and become permanent residents, or they pass them on to their children and their children come here to live. Then we can have the number go down. And we don't hurt anybody that's currently got them, because we shouldn't punish people that they hadn't broken any regulation, we hadn't cheated any ordinance to this point. But from this point forward, everybody plays by the same rule. That's my call.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rick Bale. I live at 33 Anderson Road here in Boyne City. My glasses just broke, so hopefully I can read my books tonight. I didn't write that big. But I only have a couple quick points to make. One is to thank everyone for our input. Number two, what's really great about these commission meetings is everybody has great ideas. When I was in business, I was told by employees, there's no such thing as a bad idea. And everyone has good ideas. I learn something every time something. So I'll get that. I did want to make one point on the occupancy. I think it's 15.4 in the ordinance. With a possible, I think, better solution than the 2 guests per bedroom, or 2 guests per bedroom plus 2 for the floor. And the way my mind works, if I have 1,000 square foot single story house with 2 bedrooms with 1 bath, that means I can legally have 6 people occupy that property. If I had that same property as a 2-story, with just 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, same square footage, I could now have 8 people, according to the ordinance, which makes no sense to me. I didn't increase the square footage. I didn't have bathroom. It's too many people on that side of the house. I would propose that you keep your ordinance at 2 people per legal bedroom, not a loft, not a living room with 2 pull-out sofas, but a legal bedroom, 2 people per legal bedroom, plus 1 person for the entire house. That would give you a 5-bedroom home, which are multiple homes that size here in Boyne that are on vacation rentals. That would be able to accommodate 11 people for the house. Not 16 or 24, the way they are right now. Just an idea. You know, I've done salmon fishing out of Washington, Oregon, and charter a boat. And if there's 20 people on the boat, you can catch 2 salmon per fisherman and 1 for the boat. Not 1 for the aft, not 1 for the forward, not 1 for the midship. You get 1 extra fish for the boat. And it doesn't matter who catches the fish. My wife caught 6. I caught 3. There are people that caught 0. But there were limits. I just think that's a better way to do it. On the inspection, there needs to be an inspection. And I firmly believe it needs to be from an outside party, not a affidavit that the homeowner fills out while they're watching TV and says, yeah, I've got all that stuff. They can't even, a lot of homeowners can't even manage the number of people that are coming to the property, let alone do their own self-inspection. We had rental properties in other states. They always had a inspection by an outside person done in and they charged for it. It was just part of doing business. So I really think that needs to happen. I've been doing this with my wife since 2018. And we do have 3 vacation rentals in town. We have 2 long-term rentals. So I see both sides. And we own 2 properties of our own. I'm very familiar with vacation rental by owner. That's the only website we use, not Airbnb. And when I do a search on vacation rental by owner for Boyne City area, I have 300 properties come up. Not the numbers that we have for Boyne City per se. There's 300 properties in the vicinity that come up and do a search for Boyne City, Michigan. And I do this all the time, but I did it for this meeting. The first 31 properties that come up when I do that search, I should say, of the first 31, 12 of them would not qualify for the occupancy ordinance, even the way you're going to write it. They're way over. Too many people in these houses. It's crazy. There's properties that have 2 bedrooms, a loft with 4 double beds in it, and they jam 14 people into a house with 1 bath. It just makes no sense to me. And I think the city needs to be involved, and you got to figure that part out. I don't know how you're going to handle that with places already that are open for business, and that's how they set them up. I don't have a solution for that. There's something you have to consider. That's it.
Clarification going back to the occupancy.
Yeah.
So as the draft reads, now short-term rental units shall be permitted maximum occupancy of 2 persons per bedroom, plus 2 persons per
for finished and legal floor for dwellings as described in this chapter, as we verified by inspection. So what you're saying is there should be an addition of one person,
Not an addition. It should
or,
be
or how would it read?
2 people per bedroom with 1 extra tenant for the entire house. Does that make sense?
In addition to the 2 persons per finished.
No. 1 person for the finished house, and that's how you want it.
Okay.
As
Okay,
a-
2 bedrooms.
Yeah,
Okay.
you know, I grew up with 10 brothers and sisters. We had a 2-bedroom house in one man, and it was not fun. 6 boys slept in one bed. I can't imagine what some of these vacation rentals are. It may look nice on the outside, but you have 14 people running around. It's a zoo.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Andy Brown. I live at 325 West Michigan. My first, I wanted some clarity on, because I'm seeing the reference to the traditional residential district, which I've seen along the way, but now I'm wondering how the lakefront district or other districts that are not TRD, do they live by these regulations, but they're not part of the cap? Or is that what it's, that's how I should read it? Okay. And then,
So it's directly Scott said yes.
and then I had just questions about the licensing. I know some folks were saying annually, and I guess my only question would be, did we look at some other options whereby if you license and things are going well, there's no complaints, you're running the operation the way we've asked it to be run in the city, could there be, maybe it's a 3-year licensing or something like that. So I had that question, and then if it is going to be annual, what would the cycle of that be? Because for those of us who do have short-term rentals, people are trying to do that, here in Boyne City a year in advance. So when does the licensing happen in a yearly basis, such that we're in a position to be able to rent the units out, assuming we, pass the licensing. So I had that question as well. I noticed that from one copy to this draft, there's nothing about fireworks. So I was like, I don't want to see fireworks by renters, but I didn't know if that was just all pulled out or what sort of happened with that. So had that question. And I, for one, think the occupancy is worded well. I just wanted to state that. But that's it. Thank you.
Kevin, would you mind going to the answering the question?
First question regarding the cap, just to clarify, the cap would only apply to the TRD as it is written now. And the other districts would still have a license, but they would use the caps. The way it's written now, it'd be an annual license and it's a calendar year. So the license would have to be obtained, in the month or 2 before the calendar year, probably November, December for that next year. Fireworks.
Could I ask you to follow up that? So if someone has a license at the end of 2023, are they guaranteed if they did everything according to the ordinance, they have it, if they do it by December 31st, they have a license for the next year?
No, well, maybe, because there's a cap perhaps in the TRD district. So there's probably going to be a window of open registration period or something, probably November, December. And then for the TRD district, it would be a cap. So if they didn't get in line, it'd be first come, first served. In line in time to get under that cap, it possibly could be. And then regarding fireworks, the ordinance references all city code would be applicable, so the fireworks code. This does not prevent anybody, if it owns a short-term rental, from not allowing fireworks on the property. Feel free to do that if you want. Any other questions?
I think that's it. Did we cover all the questions?
Yes, I think so. I guess I just think concerned about that licensing cycle once you guys figure that out because how far in advance people are looking.
Next.
Hi, I'm Michelle Nickel-Croft at 130 West Macon. I put my name on the file. I'm gonna go through the ordinance just because that's how I have my notes written, if that's okay. I only have one question, and it's probably to you, Scott. It says that the cap would eliminate the short-term rental personal units. My question about that is whether or not those would still need to be licensed and inspected. My opinion is that they should, just so that we have good regulation. As Rick was explaining, I think those people should have the same responsibilities of those that have a short-term rental to have fire extinguishers, particle monoxide detectors, all those things. So that was one of those. And so I'm not sure, Scott, I guess I didn't understand that question. So should I just go through all my notes?
Yeah,
here?
would you?
Okay. And then, where it states that all the licenses under 15.3.4 will expire at the end of the year, that was also a concern that I had, is if someone obtains a license in the first round and they're actively utilizing a unit, they don't have any violations, they're likely running 18 months or 24 months in advance and should be able to have an auto renewal if indeed they have met all of the requirements after that first round. Now, maybe they need to submit paperwork that says, yes, I'm renewing, if that's just the clarity that's needed. But I don't feel that people should have to go back into that pool each time. We all make life decisions and financial decisions based on ordinances and rules, no different than a bed and breakfast in town who might want to sell it. They probably can sell it with their bed and breakfast license, where a short-term rental owner should be able to do the same thing. And that leads me to my next point, which is regarding the grandfathering. And I know that that was a question that wasn't clarified in the last meeting from our perspective. We feel that people make life decisions, financial decisions, no different than a business in town or a bed and breakfast. And if we choose to sell our short-term rental, we should be given the opportunity to sell a license with it. So from a grandfathering perspective, we purchased a larger home in town, and I think we do a great job managing it. On the other hand, we paid for it based on the fact that we knew we would be able to rent that home. So, and we don't have any violation requirements, just so you know. The licensing application for short-term rentals shall be on a first-come, first-served basis, which is point 10. We feel that those should be given to active people who are actively renting right now. As we can see from the data that you've received, Scott, we had 141 in December, and we have over 170 now. People are buying because they know we don't have a cap. And so I think those of us who have been good stewards to the community should be given priority. And again, those people who are good stewards should be given the opportunity to renew their license without having to be put back on the list. The last point I think is regarding grandfathering again, and just so that you all know, we 100% disagree with the transfer statement on point 13, that should be allowed to be transferred with the ownership. Now, granted, if someone purchases the home that we have and they choose to have it as a residential unit that they're going to live in, then they would go back in the pool should they choose in 6 months if they want to rent it. But we thought that should be grandfathered in. And I agree with all of Rick's points regarding inspection. That wasn't. So I don't know. I should stay here while Scott addresses that question.
I just heard the one question regarding to personal units on the cap. And personal units would qualify as a short-term rental. So they're defined as a short-term. So they would have to be licensed.
On the grandfathered in or the transfer of license, could you consider that? Could you say that they can apply, have it get transferred into the next year, but they have to be willing to have an inspection within so many months? on that application.
Right, I live at 1111 Marshall Road. That is right next door to one of the busiest roads in town, I've been told. So I have a couple of questions, and first I'd like to agree with you in particular. This is a business. They are business. And as such, I'm going to back up for a minute. Years ago, I represented the Charlevoix Convention and Visitors Bureau. And it worked quite well. Now, at that time, there weren't many short-term rentals in Charlevoix. But it benefited the entire community to have an oversight. Besides an entity selling the town, we also acted as a little bit of an oversight to some properties that didn't exactly meet the rules and regs. So I'm wondering if you have given any consideration to establishing a Convention and Visitors Bureau whereby we could also levy a tax against these businesses, which they are businesses, and use that tax for your laminated rules and regs that could be put on the inside of the front door. First question. And secondly, I'd like to say that I think many of us have probably read John Locke. John Locke, as you know, is a philosopher who really gets the credit for the line life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but most important, he gets the credit for saying that private property rights ought to be respected and defended. So I agree completely with that. But on the other hand, and I believe your name is Monica, I'm sure you run a very nice rental.
I don't know if you own a rental.
Oh, okay.
I just feel passionate about rights of homeowners.
Okay. Well, there's a homeowner, yes, next door that personally, I have to say that we have had some lovely rentals next to us. And we've had horrible experiences as well. Now, we did a very, very silly thing when we bought this property. We had people living next door who said they needed part of our driveway, so one of them could get easily into the house. And so, trying to be neighborly, good neighbors, we gave up our setback for our driveway. No good deed goes unpunished. Flows. So I think I didn't hear this. Maybe it's in the ordinance, and maybe I just skipped it. I didn't see it. But will the local agent who is responsible for fielding calls be available 24 hours a day? Because that is often when the problems start. Often 2 o'clock in the morning. To the point where even in the dead of winter, I kind of like to get the leaf blower out about 6 o'clock. So fully acknowledging that there are private property rights should be respected. I do think that homeowners in general, the lump of us, all of us, need to have our rights considered. Thank you.
Scott, we had no discussion about creating a convention and visitors bureau.
That is not on the topic of discussion.
And the local agent will be available 24 hours a day. That's our assumption.
The way the ordinance reads, it's 45 minutes from the time of company. So that leaves around the clock. Yeah.
John, can I answer 6 West Main Street? And 6 West Main Street is in the central business district. So my concern is what part of these rules and regulations will apply in central business district? Instead of, my understanding, central business district, you know, equality, Flat tires. Already is a permitted use to rent your property with hotels or et cetera. So, I gather that the cap that we talked about for the traditional residential would not apply to the central business district. But my question is, would rental units in the central business district have to be licensed and inspected, et cetera? So that's sort of my concern. What applies in the central business district, if anything?
I'm thinking different on our whole thing. Okay.
Yeah, right.
It's covers everything.
The way it's currently written, any short-term rental in any district need to be licensed. The only difference is the cap and the tier.
Lindsay Adams, I live at 326 Spring Street. And regarding the annual fee and licensing, I think 1 year is just way too short. As was already pointed out, we're accepting reservations for both 2023 and for 2024 right now. And I think that whether you want to do an option, you can pay for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. But I think that's something that should be looked at because this is a desirable place to come. And people are looking ahead and want to make their plans. And if we have to be licensed, we would like to know that we're licensed when we're accepting reservations. Second thing on occupancy, I fall into that category that was brought up of right now we would be in violation. I have a 2-bedroom, 2-bath home. So right now we say that 8 people can't stay there. We have 2 pull-out couches in the living room, and we usually know who is coming and staying at our places, and it's very rare that we would get 8 adults coming. You know, it's typically that we get 2 sets of parents that have some kids, and that may get up to the number of 8. But I mean, if the determination is that those are my concerns.
Would you draft on that with you?
Sure.
So if it was extended from 1 year to 3 years, we're still going to be in the state at 3 years as far as when you're able to register. Because it's not going to happen after 1 year, but have you given any thought of how that might work? Or what? Because it's going
Unless you can just keep that window open, and I don't know.
Okay.
But it's a concern.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Lindsay works for Water, I Street, Street. I have a follow-up to Lindsay's question about the grandfathering and auto renewal, because yeah, we're accepting it next year and, want to make sure you are, in, accordance to the ordinance. So if you are in good standing, and you follow the requirements, at the end of the year, you have a small window of time to renew and you are grandfathered in, and it just keeps going. But every year you're filling out the same paperwork and submitting that, updating your occupancies and, any renovations happening at home, all the ordinances. So, but once you're in, would be my understanding of the business owners who want to buy houses, their houses, they're trying to keep going. And along with that, I would like to request that the sale of the home stays with the renewal of the ordinance, so that home can then fall in line and it doesn't need to drop off. The reason being is we bought homes and we renovated them to house short-term rentals and we put money in that way. Likely they probably sell with furniture and things like that. So just from a business standpoint, that would be great. To address a couple things people have said about businesses, we do have to see a use tax to the government. So we are paying some type of business taxes. If you have a second home, we're already paying double taxes as a non-homesteader. So I think we're paying quite a bit already. I'm okay paying a fee to license things. Homes of the city. For basements, I would like to request that if they're finished and they meet code, that they would be allowed. So I had 2 bedrooms down there with egress windows and, you know, if I'm gonna sell the home, families can live down there. So I'd like to have that classified. Obviously, if it's unfinished and not code, I'm not trying to keep it on there. Digital guidebook, or the guidebook, we do not have one in our home. People still copy on it. Things get outdated. We don't have anything like that. We try to do it all digital. We try to limit down. Someone said on vacation they're not reading books. People don't read. So we try to really dwindle it down, send information out very concisely to them. Here's your check-in information. By the way, there's no smoking. We allow no parties. Welcome. And send it that way. So I think that a guidebook is probably not the best solution to get people to read about ordinances. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott, just want to clarify one thing on this guidebook that I've heard numerous times. That was never the intention to have a book with maybe a page at most with the most relevant ordinances and welcome kind of message, and probably could have been language in one. No one's going to read a book. I totally agree. So that's what's the value of the thought behind that.
Thanks, Scott. I'm Matt Levens on Shelby Street. And so, as everyone else has said, I really appreciate the work that you guys are doing and the attention that you're giving. And respectfully, a lot of the fundraising there seems like a heavy-handed over-governing. I love everything that Lindsay said, probably as always, because she's fantastic. Both Lindsay's for that matter. She really nailed quite a few things. For example, we've invested over $20,000 in renovating our basement for it to qualify as a realistic bedroom by code, an egress window, a closet, etc. We have a family room that's finished. We have a bathroom that's finished, a full bathroom with a shower and laundry room and all that stuff. So, as many people have stated, when we're investing this kind of money in an opportunity to generate revenue for ourselves, for our families, for our futures, that also generate tax revenue for the city. I think that the idea of trying to overgovern that is just really, it's pretty heavy in my personal opinion. I think also as it relates to the number of people that can stay in a home, oftentimes that's really self-governed, because the reality is, and again, this goes back to the heavy hand of government. I don't mean to be disrespectful by that, but if people or guests are not happy with their stay, they're going to let you know that. You're going to be rated as such. If people can't stay or sleep comfortably in your place, they're going to let you know. And that's going to automatically affect your rating. It's going to affect the amount of rentals that you have. None of us that are responsible owners of short-term rentals want to piss off our guests. Plain and simple. Like, we want great reviews, we want happy people, and we want happy neighbors. Now, I agree that there's probably some, I'm 100% on board with the whole nuisance aspect of it. We are very, very clear, as I'm sure Lindsay and many others are, we're very clear in our terms and conditions on what's possible and what it is that you're allowed to do and not allowed to do, because we don't want to have unhappy neighbors. There were, in the last 365 days, according to Price Labs, which is a tool that I use to monitor short-term rentals in the area, there were 4.05 thousand Airbnb rentals in the last 365 days and 3.55 thousand VRBO rentals in the last 365 days. So about 7,500 rentals or 21 per day. And I'm curious to know, because last time that I checked, the number of complaints that we got, according to Mr. Spade, was very minimal, right? So 21 average rentals per day in this city and virtually zero complaints. I'm also 100% on board with neighbors knowing who the owner is, how to get hold of them, et cetera. I think that makes perfect sense because if I don't have, my neighbor actually said to me, I'm like, hey, how were our guests last weekend? Because we had 7 ladies in, and they were in for a winery tour. So I'm like, oh, hey, like this could be interesting. Of course we laid down the ground rules and all that stuff. Asked my neighbor afterwards, and he said, honestly, they were quieter than you. Okay, great. That's perfect. That's what I want to hear. So, I would like some clarity on the cap when I'm done with my time here, and what that looks like. And also, it seems like the idea of the cap being in the TRD, frankly, is kind of prejudiced. It seems very preferential that there's a cap on that area, but not a cap on the waterfront district. Why? Because they have more money? Because they have bigger homes? Because they're further apart? I don't really understand what the purpose behind that is. It seems, again, very prejudiced, quite frankly. And how are you going to manage age? Because the platforms in and of themselves, when it comes to 18 and under, you're not allowed to ask. Like, we don't know how old their children are, if they're 2 years old, if they're a year old. Again, that strikes me as very heavy-handed on the part, or on the part of this particular ordinance. And then the idea of people not getting relicensed, as everyone has pointed out, like that's frankly absurd. Like, we have invested an incredible amount of money into our place. We've employed a ton of people, cleaners, contractors, etc. And then just because we didn't get there in time, you guys are going to pull the license from us, or like we just didn't make it into the pool. Like, think about that from a perspective of liquor licensing or anything else, like, or any other business or any personal life. Where else in life does that happen? That your rights get taken away from you that you've already had? It just doesn't make sense. So how is it that we, or like Lindsay, either Lindsay, about 24 months out, able to like really make decisions on it? It just doesn't make sense to me. So I would love answers to those questions.
Make sure you expressed your thoughts, but I'm not sure I'm clear.
But yeah, there were 2 questions. So the cap, why the TRD only? Why not everywhere? And the other question is, how are you going to manage the age? Which is, well, yeah, she just pointed out it's discriminatory, by the way. You may as well say you don't want to make black people here.
Captain TRD was to facilitate the objective of the housing issue. From the numbers, the TRD is by far where most of the new units are. And there has been a phenomenon in the last 7 to 8 years of the transition of single-family units into short-term rentals, reducing that housing stock. Along the lakefront, the multifamily districts, short-term rentals have been happening there for a long time, and those numbers are actually remaining pretty consistent. And so those don't really factor into the whole policy objective that this ordinance is trying to get at, as opposed as with the nuisance and the public safety issue. In regards to the age requirements, the 36 month, basically people younger than that don't count towards as an occupant. So I'm not quite sure how that's discriminatory, but it's a pretty common thing in multiple ordinances that I've seen where people have very young children that they're not counted against the occupancy. So that was the thought there.
I just don't know how that can be managed when you're just getting 18 and under, and that's it. That's all you get from the platform. It's just children. 3 adults, 3 children.
Hello, my name's Stephanie Dixon, 1110 Boyne Street. The one thing I wanted to address was the conversation about occupancies per bedroom and other potential living and dining spaces. I appreciate the story and the not your experience on the fishing boat, like it's adorable, I'm relevant to this. For example, HUD's occupancy rate has a 2+1. And that was a revision that was made in 2017, that's a 2+1 per bedroom. Now, there are things that municipalities can put in place, size of bedroom, things like that. And I recognize that that refers to renters, not like long-term homeowners. The other thing in relevance to that is that we all have taken people into our homes, family members, vacationing, family members in transition or hardship. We all have friends that have come through, and we've had people stay in our homes that would go over that, occupancy that's being discussed with 2+1 for the whole home. And my concern with that is that homeowners aren't being regulated in that way. Why would renters be? These situations with homeowners, with family or friends, or situations like that that arise, that's temporary. Just as short-term rentals are temporary. You have people that there may be a one-off, a week stay or so where it's over the 2+1 per home occupancy, but would we really go to our neighbors and take in family members or friends in and tell them they have too many people in their home when they're being respectful of all the other rules and regulations? I don't think so. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sandy Richard, 526 East Lincoln Street. We're making progress, for sure. I've heard it's no particular, the noticing, I don't think that's an unreasonable request. For just make it simple, X distance from the particular location, that it's on the STR administration person, whoever it is, to provide that communication. Yeah, whatever. I'm also trying to understand what the difference, what is the definition of owner occupied? And that we make the distinction in short-term personal units. I don't understand why they're exempt. It still is a potential, particularly in cases of AHU, auxiliary housing units. Steve Schnell, Housing North, was very clear about that being one of the prime opportunities to have long-term rentals for people. It's the equivalent of an apartment. And I'm sure there's a bunch of folks that would be thrilled to be able to loan the AHU. Because the subject is very, very large controversy in Charter City, and quite honestly, I didn't have the time to go figure out how they solve it. I'm glad to hear that you're investing money in the properties. I think every little homeowner does jump in and make improvements. So it's, you can talk about what they call them, Joe Sixpack, not being able to afford the house. Well, I think there's a lot of people that absolutely have high ownership and would be thrilled to have a home. I actually am against grandfathering. We must have a cap, and we need to get this under control. If there is grandfathering, this thing will go out at tonight. And I don't believe that it should transfer with the property. It's not a career, unless you're going to put yourself, it's a commercial enterprise, if that's where you're going. The cap should maybe take into consideration some density. If it's all aggregated in one place, that should be, like you were saying, consideration of how many residential homes are in an area that the cap should be a percentage of. I'm going to go point to Charlevoix. They got a real problem. They've actually started their own ad hoc committee because only 40% of their units are private residences. So they capped at 80. The occupancy thing, I'm sure you guys will work out. To me, it makes sense to tie it to a bedroom. I like the idea of 2+1, 2 per plus 1. But I need some help understanding the reason for the exemption of a personal unit and what is that exactly. I find it very interesting. I said this to you guys back when we started this eons ago,
And we said, well, this isn't Boyne City, but every major city with a tourist destination has in their regulations, we're not gonna get that here, but I'm simply saying that their hosts must be permanent residents. So they're that stringent in LA, and in Washington, in Los Angeles, in Boston, in Seattle. Hosts must be the resident, the owners must be part of the must reside there. So that's where I'm gonna come back to owner occupied. What does that mean? Is it a duration of time that's 1 month here? I don't understand. If you could, please clarify what owner occupied is. So we're making progress, but really we need to get it done because I think one person pointed out, and for sure, people are speculators are buying their houses as quickly as they can. Thank you.
If you wait just a staff, you can address the owner file.
Owner occupied is a term that's used in zoning ordinance and does describe accessory dwelling units. This definition is carried over to here. Owner occupied means you live on the property, that's your primary residence. And so the personal unit would be an accessory unit, but the person could live in the accessory unit, rent out the primary unit. They just have to live on the property. That would be their primary residence, that parcel. The personal unit would still need to be registered, licensed, and fall under all those rules. It just wouldn't count towards the cap, with the rationale being the primary dwelling is being used as a house. So that's, meeting our goal for having housing. And then the accessory dwelling unit is, may help that person, pay, their mortgage and pay some bills and do that, and then maybe use that in the future in the long term. And maybe this would encourage more accessory dwelling units, thus creating more housing. So that's kind of the rationale.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Jan Crusoe, I'm from Lake Shore. And lots of good comments tonight, and I just wanted to comment on 3 things that I've heard, and one for the short-term rental owners. There does need to be a way that you don't have to worry that next year they're not going to get your turn in line. You've been doing this for so long. And some of the comments I'm making are things that I read in ordinances that have been developed in other communities. So learning from what people have already done, and a lot of the ordinance for people who are current short-term rental owners say, like in September, they just have to signal their intent for next year. And then they're already in, and some predetermined deadline have to pay, pay their licensing fee, but they can continue their business just by signaling their intent as long as they are in good standing and have no violations. And then with regard to occupancy, some of the ordinances I've read, they just handed it over to the health department, and the health department can decide instead of us trying to figure it out. So that's just one other option. And then with regard to sale of the home and the transfer of the property, there are 2 sides to that coin. And while you've made that investment, when you're going to sell it, then your turn is over. And people, for example, if every year you get first dibs at renewing, then there are some people who might want to get in. But if your house gets turned over to somebody that's just coming in from left field, the people who have been waiting to be able to start licensing, they're SOL again. So I think that has to be considered as well.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you, Grayson Boyne from Silver Street. And this is just a question for Scott, but we might apply to others. Sorry, it's an insider question because Scott already knows my situation in that since our house sits on property that's 4 legally separated lots, this idea of the personal unit and the auxiliary unit, would that be approached as per each lot, or let's say we had a second auxiliary unit on adjacent to the house, but it's on one of those legally defined separate lots. How would that fall in relation to the ordinance as it's currently drafted?
Each principal dwelling on its own parcel would be its own entity. So if we had 4 individual parcels, individual principal dwellings, each would have the ability to be licensed as its own unit. If you had an accessory dwelling with one of those parcels, then you could have that personal unit as part of that parcel. But people who own multiple units, whether they're adjacent or not, those will all be considered individual.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, so we'll bring this over to Commissioner deliberation and one thing out there is to approve this public comment. So,
A lot of the others, we appreciate all the time. I just kind of wrote down one of the big words there that I heard that it seems like we should have better clarifications of basement. So licensing renewal seems to be something that needs a bit more fine tuning. Cap, several times. Parking. Regularly parking. The grandfathering still needs some people, with some clear definition. The inspection, there's comments about the inspection by really third party. The notice to neighbors, how we're going to let neighbors know who the owner is. We're going to have a website listing all the short-term rental owners, if that's the way we do it. And then so those are more than one.
So I love all the input here tonight. Once again, thank everyone for showing up. In going over what I did was this, pour over the ordinance the whole way and made my notes originally before coming tonight. So it was brought up quite a few times on the basement aspect, and I think that really needs to be addressed. I don't see a problem if it's a finished basement, if it's got the egress, as long as it's qualified living space. I think so. In my world, as a realtor, we live in above ground living space and then qualified living space. So finished basement, qualified living space, but so I would like to see that addressed. I don't think that I think that throwing that out, throwing basements out just in general is not fair. But, right. The next, just going down the ordinances, as you wrote it, Scott, the cap, we talked a lot, the TR, the traditional residential district, it was mainly because in the past ones, it was brought up, why there? Well, mainly it was because of the neighboring, trying to create the neighborhoods and the neighborhoods slipping away, if you will. And so that was a great point that was brought up about the density aspect. And I think to Scott's graphs and everything like that, there seems to be a large concentration, Main Street South. And, so maybe there's a way to massage that out and say if somebody, had something on this side of town, maybe, maybe there's a way to cap areas. Not trying to complicate it. I thought that was a great point. So the occupants, the occupancy, so the way that we have it written in here is an individual 36 months of age and older. So you don't have to raise your hand, but I will say that, you know, in traveling with 5 women, you know, I never listed, you know, 6 people when the kids were young. I mean, you know, you're traveling on a budget, and we went into a hotel room. I'm like, yeah, all right, sneak them in. Kind of you go in with a couple of them, I'll go in with the other. And no one has to agree with that or disagree with that. I'm just saying that, you know, I think I'm one of 8. All right, so everybody in here knows that. They don't know that, but now you know that. So much to, you know, Rick's point, I was one of 10 in a 2-bedroom trailer with 1 bath for 6 months. That was very frank. So I get that aspect, but you know, it's mainly about families traveling. And I think I have a real problem with, you know, I get it. I would say the occupant, if they're, you know, what, 13 and older, because when they start being 13 and older, they turn into little assholes. So I can see that. You know, so teenagers are just teenagers, but up until then, they're pretty much not doing anything without mom and dad. So I guess only my opinion, I would like to see that number adjusted, and that's where the occupancy gets really, really fluid in my mind. I get it. You know, if you know, if it says you sleep 6, that means you sleep 6 adults. But I mean, I guess I wouldn't have a problem if grandma and grandpa were with, you know, their child and significant other, and then they had 2 or 3 kids with them. I don't see a problem. And now you're starting to, you know, you're starting to, you know, cut, you know, split hairs. I get it, but I guess of all the people in here that do the short-term rentals, you don't, when you have them fill out your form or whatever it is, it doesn't say, you know, Julie, Bill, and then, you know, 3 kids, or, you know, you don't have to fill out anything. Nothing? No one? Okay, that's fine. That's kind of different. I mean, every short-term rental that I've ever rented, I've had to list who's coming, you know, Marty, Connie, Brittany, Kristen, you know, blah. So that's different for me, but and I don't see a problem asking who's coming. So bottom line is I have a real problem with like being anything other than 13 and, you know, older, as far as other than that, is their luggage, you know, they're traveling with mom and dad. The one thing that I marked on my sheet, Scott, the short-term rental property that offers the rental of a dwelling unit for compensation for more than 28 days total per calendar year. Don't have a problem with that. But this goes kind of like to the Harvard, and you know, I think that the rest of that should for terms no greater than 29 days, because then you get into that calendar. You know, if they're there for a month, it's not really a short-term rental. You know, it's in my mind. Just again, my 2 cents. Transfer, this is going to make half the people happy, half the people unhappy. I am not for grandfather in any way, shape, or form. It's much like the debacle that we have with our marina. I mean, there's people that have had a boat slip for 40 years. It's a public marina. And just because they've been there, they get to keep it. You know, no one else can have that stuff. I don't think that's right in any way, shape, or form. I get it, the investment that was made, but there was somebody else that said a lot of people make investments in their homes. So I would not, I'm not for a grandfathering aspect. If you know, if you sell the property, you sold the property, what do you care? You know, if the next person, you know, gets the license or not. And I know where that answer is going to be, because it makes a difference, because now, you know, now you're picking winners and losers to an extent too, as far as the sale is. Going the rest of the way down here, Liz got an problem. Oh, and so there was a couple of people that said over-regulating and nitpicking stuff. Six sub E sub two, the property, yeah, our wording was kind of ridiculous, I think. The property has all necessary insurance for the rental unit. Who's gonna check that? All I said was, I think we need to clean that up. You know, they supply you with, here's who I'm insured through, I'm insured through State Farm, boom, you know, is insured and through which firm is what I said. Let's see. And then E subset 4, a list of all websites where other media where the unit is advertised. Again, who's going to police it? I think we're making stuff that we're just going to bog ourselves down. Let's see. You answered my number 7, and how many, the personal unit thing. I really would like to know what exactly that number is. The application fee, everybody in this room said, fine, do the application fee. We didn't figure out what that's going to be and how much. Let's see. Going on to 13, I already talked about. That was the transfer aspect. And then number 14, I think licenses will revert to the city. I think needs to just cease to exist after expiration. We didn't, yeah, I think there's better wording there. But, maximum occupancy, we've already talked about that. And then the number 4, subsection 15.4, sub 4, compliance with the codes. The short-term rental units must meet all applicable residential building, health department, nuisance, safety codes. So this is back there. It's kind of split here. Who's gonna do this? I think the self-reporting, if there's an issue, I don't have a problem with that because I was big on some of the over-regulation aspect of that. Let's see. And then, so 15.5, sub 5, E, I made D. This was in response to, so what I don't want to see is, again, we're trying to create neighborhoods. Supposedly, what everyone has kind of said that, they want to see more of them, or at least the majority has. I'm not saying everybody is. I don't want to pit neighbor against neighbor. So, which was why I was against having, this stuff plastered, on the front door and stuff, because now it's Mrs. Kravitz, and well, I'm just gonna, be right over me and be in their business every day, and you're not going to stop that, but at least, if they have to go to a website or something, it would diminish it a little bit. But, so I would like to see if he is not followed, the complaint should be dismissed. So this was about the complainant. So if the neighbor says, they're just driving me nuts and I can't stand this. And they haven't followed up with the police, like it says here, and they haven't followed their protocol, then it should be dismissed. So I think there needs to be a D. If he is not followed, then the complaint should be dismissed. Period. See, the appeal procedure, I just know it on here. I think we got to work on that a little bit. And then, so I'll shut up in just one second because there was a couple other things that I think I missed. And everybody's going, no, I don't think you missed anything. I guess I'll just let it go and done. I'll be a little quicker. Always are. So the issues I'm seeing right now, I think the first really easily is parking. Mr. Bowman's email about the parking problems, and it's got a lot of people complaining about the parking. Too many cars parked all over Timbuktu, and everybody's
way, parking on the property that the SCR is on, or on the adjacent roadway, adjacent to the property that it's on. Two simple fixes. They're not in everybody else's space. And as far as the cap on the TRD only, I'd like to see that. I don't know who brought that up, but maybe a cap, on all the districts. I was thinking a little bit differently. We've heard several complaints about problems in the lakefront district, and that's some big problems there that people have had, years have had with vacation rentals right next door, and also the stories of big companies coming in buying up as many lakefront homes as they can to turn it into vacation rentals. I think if you put a cap on those two, maybe that would help some of the lakefront people not have to put up with that problem. The third thing is license. I agree. 1 year is too short. To Lindsay's point, you got people booking 2 years in advance. I think there should be 2 or 3 years, as long as there's been no problems. And licensing, I agree. I think grandfather is a bad idea. I would like to see something on whether this is way out in left field or not. But as far as if we get a licensing into the cap, I'd like to see a priority to Boyne City residents versus businesses. People who live here and have the roots here versus somebody out of California or Colorado, just using this as a business money. I'd like to see that. That's all I got. Oh, also real quick, obviously, most of you are aware, I have a vacation rental myself. And I know we talked about this several months ago when we get close to a vote or any kind of deliberation that's going to affect me. The proper thing is to step up. And I'm well aware of that. And I'm trying to be careful of that. But if anybody sees that we're getting close to something that's going to make that a problem, my vacation rental conflict of interest. But now, we should all let step over the line. Especially.
Thanks, Dan.
Well, I think the question of why are we doing this, good point of reference, is to be proactive to eliminate problems. Have we had any problems? As you pointed out, no, we haven't. The math was exorbitant that there's many renters per year, very little issues. With that being said, I don't want to ignore people that have had issues in the neighborhood. So that's why we're trying to address these proactively. I think most of those complaints are going to be solved by 3 things that I think we're all agreeing. One is the registration licensing process. Number 2 is the local contact person in 45 minutes. And number 3 is the ability, but more importantly, the knowledge that your last resort is calling the police. And I think those 3 things are going to take care of 99.9% of the problem. So that leads me into what I've stated the last few weeks, the last few meetings, is I don't want to over-regulate. And I think the least amount of regulation is where I stand. I don't want to get into us over-regulating when we don't have any regulations on long-term rentals. We don't have any regulations on the regular residential homes. So I don't want to put us in a position where short-term rentals are the point of emphasis to solve problems we need to solve by overreaching. So that being said, I've said before, I don't think that we need to regulate occupancy. I think occupancy will be regulated by persons that are running the short-term rentals. Again, as we stated, if you don't get a good review, that's not good for you. And as Marty had stated, as I stated last time, there's all types of situations where there is a legitimate family, two families, brothers and adults that come together and you get a 3-bedroom home, and that's 3 families. It's going to be more than 2, 4, 6 plus 1, 7, it'll be more than 7 people. It's going to be a whole heck of a lot of people, whether going out traveling, baseball teams and softball teams, whether it's families like Marty, whether it's families like mine, my daughter married a great family, and she had 40 people on 4th of July that she housed in bed. But it was at her own house. Point is, I don't think we need to get into the occupancy. It'll take care of itself, which kind of eliminates the issue of defining the basement. We're going to eliminate occupancy. We don't have to define what is a basement, what is a bedroom, what is a living room, what is a pull-up couch. The licensing renewal, I think Marty said it, I agree with them. It makes sense to have some type of logical renewal because they basically says it's only 3 years out. So we have to somehow create wording that that license can be renewed within a window of time for the following year and for the following 2 years. I'm not sure on that. We can put that up. The cap, as Marty said, and George said, is to protect our neighborhoods. So I would agree with the cap. However, we're at we are at 7.2% right now. I think we can get above that. But I didn't mention 10%. I can live with a 10% cap, but a cap within every district, I don't know. I'd have to have some data to prove one way or the other. That makes sense. Parking. I agree that when you do your licensing registration, that you do tell us through an affidavit how many bedrooms, what your parking plan is, and what else would be that is a tool that can be used for the local contact person and for the police and for the administration to know how many cars can be parked on that site, and it can be solved. I think the grandfather clause is good. I agree that people have invested time and money, and it doesn't make sense to pull right away. You don't lose a business license, a liquor license, I got a builder's license. I don't need to lose those unless I underperform. And just the fact that your grandfather was based on, you might lose the grandfather clause. I think about that one. I think the inspections can be done by an affidavit. Somehow notifying the neighbors wise. It's been mentioned many times. Marty mentioning you want to create friends with your neighbors. You don't want to create enemies with your neighbors. And so by being in front, having some type of a notice that yes, this house is a rental, call me. Here's my number. So I think inclusion, licensing, registration, yes. Local contact person, 45 minutes, yes. Inspection by affidavit, yes. Some type of a visitor's guide, and or we call it something else, guide. We call it one sheet. Good neighbor guide, or good neighbor's guide, visitor's guide, good neighbor's guide, better. And that Monica pointed out could have something's about fireworks, something's about why they're 10:30, why something's about fire days, something's about parking, something's about garbage. Doesn't have to be pretty simple, bold, and that can be left with tenant, also you have to be supplied by the owner of the tenant. So I guess the one I'm kind of passionate about is the occupancy. Where the business by deciding occupancy when we don't decide occupancy in the other one. It will solve everything. So, I hope that helps. I don't know if we're all ready there, but it's clear.
Sure, one clarification, do you, and I understand where you're coming from. So grandfathering, is anybody that's got a short-term rental in this room? They got a short-term rental. That's not what I'm saying. The way that you were talking about, I just want to make sure that I understood you. The grandfather that I'm talking about is that, you know, when they're done and they go, I'm done with my short-term rental, I'm selling it. No, it doesn't transfer. It's much like the boat slip up here, you know, just because you sold your boat to your kid, doesn't mean you can slip. That was my only clarification. The grandfather is, and George was the one brought it up. I think, well, this is what Rich was talking about. The 2 to 3 year, I don't have a problem with that. You know, you give a 2 to 3 year license, and as long as there aren't any complaints, anything like that, then why not? You still renew it on a yearly basis, but you're still kicked out at 2 years or 1 or 2 years, whatever it is.
Yeah, commissions, guys, I think pretty much. Okay, so in other words, if I sell a business in town and they change it from a clothing store to a restaurant, they're not grandfathered. Can I explain that to this guy? So there's, if I sell a home and the new buyers wants to turn it into a short-term rental, that's okay. If I sell a home that's short-term rental, and the buyers want to keep it that, they go through the registration process, they wouldn't actually be guaranteed.
Right. What you're reviewing is the police model ordinance. It doesn't have any grandfather protections that the zoning ordinance does. So if you wanted to put those in, that would be something you would have to put in the ordinance. There's no guaranteed protection that this ordinance will give you. So if you want to say you have one, you can get one annually. That's something that can be done.
No, I just wanted that. Well, Scott, how do you see us moving forward here?
Well, I think the occupancy question needs to be answered. The renewal, the way I'm picturing this is if you wanted to do a multi-year renewal, for the first time, it would be like 2 or 3 years. And then you renew that annually. And then, like Marty said, kick it out the next year. So those folks that would be doing the 24 months in advance, they would know that they would have. In regards to priorities, I'm not sure how that would be demonstrated. It would be difficult to say, pick and choose, you know, you're a resident, you're not, I find that could be very hard. Parking, I think that's pretty easy to address. Identify on the site plan, and then at least a portion of that. Then the basement definition, you know, going Tom's point, if you don't have an occupancy number, you don't need it. But if you're going to have an occupancy number, you do. So I guess be clear there. And then I'm hearing, I believe from the majority, that the affidavit for the inspections is the way to go. I don't think you all agree on that, but that's what the majority is. And then Marty talked about the applicable codes. So the way it's written now, it's just referencing all those that I guess I don't quite understand how you look at that or you do different.
Oh, which part?
We should talk to one that's, the building codes, kitchen codes, all those.
Oh, yeah, no, I got that. It was mainly. I understand that you're already held to all of normal codes, but I didn't want to, I didn't want to expound, I didn't want to expand on and put more. Again, back to the old record.
Yeah, well, there will be no more additional codes. This is more reference that, yeah, you.
Okay, referencing back.
Yeah. So if someone called or claimed that, hey, this short-term rental doesn't meet building code, that could be a temporary violation. Short-term ordinance. They didn't have warnings, could have eat something like that. Then that's something that we could say, okay, you don't need a license because you're in violence of the short-term rental. Or it's because you don't have, you know, safety money.
Well, I think that, I get where you're coming from. I think that goes back to what, you know, a lot has been said and Jordan made reference to is that a lot of that will filter out on its own, you know, I mean, if you don't have a safe house, you don't have a purse, and somebody shows up for ski season, right, you're probably gonna hear it.
The notice requirements.
So the notice that the neighbors.
You're right.
Short-term rental.
Yeah. I don't know if that's the direction you want to go. I think putting a short-term rental list on the website would be pretty easily done. You'd probably take care of that issue. But if you do want to have a notice requirement, you've done other ways to do, then I did it for Evangeline. Very labor intensive, but it's getting done.
There, are you going to provide your views?
I think I have in the past, but when I was wondering, Scott, is how I started getting to the point of trying to make decisions because our conversation tonight is a lot like the one we had the other, our last meeting. So do you see the need for us to have another special meeting on the short-term rental? Ready to package the grant ordinance for the city's commission to actually start making a decision? Or do you think it would be better to have
I guess, I was turning that question back on you. How close is this one? With the kind of thing we talked about, and we can see something that we can agree on.
I think a good part of it is something the occupancy, I think we're just going to have to kind of, that'll be a decision we make, you know, when we get deciding on the ordinance. I don't necessarily agree with all my wishes. Okay. The cap, I think the cap in the conditional residential is important. Preserving our needs. All agree with that. Yes. The parking, I guess, is confusing to me because we have no parking on city streets most of the year. So you can't park on the streets anyway. So that's going to complicate some things. When it comes to regulating parking.
Well, that's what I did want to get in regulating parking. It's always regular. So I still have to legally park. But that's right.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, so, parking, I can park anywhere in town alongside the road, still come right away. So, in a short-term rental, are you saying all vehicles have to be on the property?
No, what I'm saying is have a plot plan showing your parking and number of people that are there. Then being able to have that discussion with that person saying, I got room to park one car and I have 15 people that can stay in my house. Okay, where are they gonna go? So they be able to have that discussion. If there's no available public parking along the street or that, there's gonna be an issue and we'll raise that. So if you know, we find that we're parking illegally, that may be a reason to revoke your license. That was my. That's
Can I, that's where, and I understand where you're coming from, Scott, but that's where, so anybody in here that, you know, actually has a license, with the way you just finished that, and I'm not trying to turn your words on you, but I mean, so if somebody parks illegally and now, you know, one of these people, you know, gets their license revoked because they had some, you know, not parking properly. I have no problem with that. I mean, I get it. I know where you're going probably is that, you know, they'll get notices, hey, you know, happen once, they'll happen again, you know, but I mean, you can't always, they can't, I mean, unless they live right next door, they can't, you know, they don't know what their, renters are doing, you know, 24/7.
Well, that's where they would need to make it clear what those regulations are and what it is. And, you know, if someone's illegally parks one day and, you know, we're not gonna come down and rip a license. It would have to be, you know, an egregious repeat kind of offense. And I see people that, yeah, you know, the kind of process that I see is, you know, for the typical instance, people are gonna say, yeah, I got 3 places here, we could park, and it's not gonna be an issue. And quite frankly, you know, parking has been a limited complaint. I mean, it has happened, but we don't get a lot of those in place, and typically it's during, you know, certain time of the year. Yeah. And I think we just make it a priority to pass that information on to the license holder, that, you know, this is an issue, you have adequate room, and if you don't, what's your plan, and you know, let's have that conversation. Yeah, I don't think we want to be campaigning and able to talk to these things out.
Those guys are saying when the license. First of all, with the license, when they paid the registration fee, they gave you a floor plan and a parking plan.
Right, so you know, I got a 4-bedroom house, we anticipate that was 4 couples. Okay, we can anticipate 4 cars, we're gonna be.
There you go. And the police and maybe also, well, that would be open to the public, probably would be open to the public, to the police department. They go up there and there's 14 cars.
Right.
Yeah.
So commissioners, do you think we need another special meeting or do you think we can put this in as a, you know, regular meeting? We don't necessarily tax it, ordinance that are, you consider it as a commission meeting, it can be postponed. It's one thing we have. There are that many things that are still. And that's certainly what we need to put that together. For special meetings.
I think we're ready for Scott to give us a proposal. And I think the public has been well spoken and I think the issues have been fine. It's just a matter of where we agree, where we agree, don't agree, but it needs to be actual written down by Scott, close to us. I guess I'm ready for that.
I would agree.
Yeah, I think Scott got some good direction today. That, you know, just from the comments out there, well done.
What I would anticipate is bringing the draft back to you whenever meetings are appropriate, but not for first reading, just for kind of a final review. And then if there's agreement, we can move forward.
So what would be the process, Scott, for taxing the board this like this?
We have to come to the city commission for first reading. Then the commission agrees that it should move forward instead of the second reading. That readings can happen a little sooner than a month after the first. And then it would have to be at that second reading approved and adopted, and then it would become effective at the publication in 15 days.
So we're talking about the end of the year, or the first of 2023 being the start date. Do we have enough time to get the ordinance in place with the schedule you just outlined?
It will be tight, but possible.
So the, so going the way that we're saying, right now, Scott, so you do your proposal and we all look it over and then we still tweak that, okay? And then you come back So until we're done tweaking, the first reading,
Well, that's,
that we
why you would need most effectively do it, is to have that finalized, that we're setting the first reading. Because once you get that first reading, you can't substantially change, you can tweak here and there, but as long as you can't change any substance of the regulation, you do that there and there.
so worst case scenario, we tweak the next 3 normal meetings that we had. No, I understand. I was just saying, worst case scenario, at that point in time, that would put us to the end of September. Is that doable to have the readings and get it done to implement by the end of the year? Yeah.
Okay, the other question or concern we should address is George bringing up the fact that he's a short-term rental owner and how that figures into now that we're getting close to the decision on an ordinance. Is that something we should review with our city attorney to get an updated opinion, or do you have any input on that, Mike?
I think it'd probably be wise too. I think you're getting close. I appreciate George bringing it up. I'm not sure if we're at that point, but it might be good to review with Rhonda.
I think George is a different case because it's on his property.
Yeah.
So it's what Scott's saying, that, it's sort of, we're not looking, his wouldn't be capped things.
Yeah. That's your goal.
Yep.
Okay, with that, I think we've come to the end of our business.
I think everybody.
We have, good in the order, is there any good in the order, commissioners? Our next regular city commission meeting is August 23rd at noon. I entertain a motion for adjournment. Second. All those in favor, say aye.